Hello everyone, my name is GamerZakh and welcome back to another Dev Diary for Ara History Untold. If this is your first time here, welcome. Be sure to subscribe and ring that bell to stay updated with the latest content for Ara. In today's episode, we're pulling back the curtain on the exhaustive research process for Ara and the monumental task of sifting through the entirety of human history and choosing which pieces to play with in this massive virtual sandbox. Walking us through that process is Grace Rojas, narrative designer and historian on Ara. Grace, welcome to the show.
Hello, I'm so excited to be here, Zach.
Now, before we dive in, today's chat with you is actually a precursor to a new type of Dev Diary series for Ara that will be kicking off later this week. Can you give us a sneak preview of what that might be?
Yes, of course. So there is a feature in Ara that's named the Encarta that sort of encompasses much of what we'll be speaking about today, and we'll be using that as a jumping off point to showcase not only the historical inspiration for various elements of the game like leaders, triumphs, masterpieces, as well as the function those elements will have through gameplay. And those of you following along will also get to meet my partner in crime, Tori, who has been researching and writing alongside me. And she has been an essential part to the success of this feature. So stay tuned so you get to meet her.
That sounds awesome. Well, you heard it here first, folks. Stay tuned later this week for that. All right, Grace, can you tell us a bit about your background and how you became involved with the Ara History Untold project?
Of course, yeah. My journey into Ara has been a few years in the making. I'm a professional historian with my research specialty rooted in medieval Europe. My background and work as a medievalist and writer led me into the gaming world, where I started on as a historical content writer for Age of Empires. While I was there, I really fell in love with the possibilities that come with writing history for games. So when I was presented with the opportunity to join the Ara team as a narrative designer and historian, I could not have been more excited.
Oh, that's really fascinating. And also, I think we all love history here, so we love that you're here. With that covered, let's dive straight into Ara's research process. Where does one start in history? How did you decide which time periods to look at?
Well, in my eyes, history is about storytelling. It's a common misconception that history is strictly about the facts and figures, or in the case of a game like ours, the victors and the losers. But history goes way beyond that. To truly understand history, we must also be willing to dive deep into the past by acknowledging and examining pieces of the story that can often be overlooked, and how that information contributed to the development of the world as we know it. Another piece which was key to our approach for this game was ensuring that the information we present to the players is as accurate and unbiased as possible. I do want to acknowledge, though, that history itself can be biased for a variety of reasons, but we work tirelessly to ensure that we present to the world accurate and respectful representations of the cultures and people we decided to highlight. To do this, we worked with a mix of primary and secondary sources. We consulted with experts on the subject matter, and we received feedback from folks who have ties to the regions we cover, and so much more.
So yeah, generally it's a lot more complicated than most people think it is.
It is,
so,
yeah.
Going back to the beginning, did you look at nomadic groups or start with the first accounts of agriculture? Where's the start?
So we looked at including hunter-gatherers and pre-agrarian content, but ultimately decided that the right cutoff point to begin with compelling accounts of world history was at the beginning of the first sedentary agrarian settlements.
When it comes to the technologies in the game, how did you decide which technologies to include with each era?
Well, it was a mixture of when they were accessible historically and thematically appropriate for the age. In some cases, we did steer away from history to find a nice balance between reality and gameplay. I also do want to note that the moment the player engages with the technology choice, it becomes alternative history, which is really exciting. It allows you to make history yours. The things you unlock with technologies can be surprising, and finding the hidden links between various advancements achievements and what they activated within societies was a big focus for us too.
So moving from the technologies, Ara has a huge selection of leaders. Were there any lesser-known historical figures or nations that you were particularly excited to include?
Yes. Okay, so during the selection process, I was really stoked to see leaders like Benito Juarez, Sappho, and Sejong the Great.
Oh, that's cool. So it's not just the ones you expect. So how do the personalities and historical decisions of leaders influence their strategies and behaviors in the game?
They really factored into every decision we made about the leaders. Every leader's personality traits are driven by research into their real-world history, and each leader's unique leader ability speaks to one of their great accomplishments as leaders. The initial relationships between leaders are impacted by how much they may or may not have in common with each other, and it also impacts the way that their AI chooses to pursue prestige and ultimately victory.
Going to knowledge, as we mentioned at the top of the show, the Encarta is like Ara's built-in encyclopedia, containing gameplay and historical info on almost everything in the game. Were there any big challenges that came with creating this information archive?
Yes, so creating the Encarta has been a really exciting but challenging task for everyone involved in the process. It took some time for us to find a sweet spot where we could do justice to the information we're presenting while also keeping the content approachable for players. To achieve this, we needed to keep the content a reasonable length and use accessible language so players that are both casual enjoyers of history or really big history buffs feel like they can learn something new without taking too much time away from their gameplay. I'm really proud of my Encarta team, and I really hope that players find this feature to be something they look forward to interacting with every time they decide to play our game.
All right, so for some perspective on the scale of the problem you're dealing with, looking through all the famous monuments, buildings, and landmarks, how did you decide which triumphs to include in a game like Ara, and what inspired the bonuses they give in-game?
So, during our decision-making process for the triumphs and the bonuses, we kept a few points in mind. We knew we wanted to capture people's favorite monuments, which tend to be ancient, but we also wanted to expand that definition to include more interesting and more modern achievements. Ultimately, we tried to bring in a truly global perspective, grabbing triumphs from places in the world that have been traditionally underrepresented in our genre.
So, will players encounter any unique cultural interactions or narrative events based on historical precedents?
Yes, I think that players will find themselves really immersed in history throughout the game, but especially in events. We put a lot of thought into the hundreds of events a player can encounter throughout the game and handpicked historical information covering topics including nations, people, cultures, and themes from across the world.
So, on a bit more of a personal note, how do you hope the historical content in Ara will impact players' understanding of history?
I hope that this content allows every player to learn something new about history and encourages them to continue to be curious about the subject. I really want players to feel inspired to also take a different approach to their search for knowledge, whether that's on a topic they're familiar with or maybe a brand new historical subject that they're feeling a little bit more inquisitive about.
Now, were there any specific monuments that presented unique challenges in terms of historical accuracy or representation?
Oh boy. Yeah, so some of the triumphs that we do have in game no longer physically exist. So we had to piece together what they looked like from written accounts, recorded oral accounts, primary sources, illustrations, renderings. So those were the hardest to ensure we got right because it required a lot of cross-referencing research with other architectural and cultural norms of the time.
All right, now for a bit of a gamer question. Are there any hidden historical Easter eggs or references for players to discover?
I'm so glad you asked this question. I won't give too much away, but what I will tell y'all is that there are historical references and historical Easter eggs to spot throughout the game. Ultimately, we're trying to render a living world with authentic historicity, which includes little moments of levity, but also really fine details discovered during the research of the game. So keep an eye out.
All right, I guess if you told us, it wouldn't be hidden Easter eggs, huh?
That's true.
Okay, so looking back, what has been the most rewarding aspect of working on Ara?
Well, I have absolutely loved working on this project, but I think the most rewarding aspect of working on Ara has to be knowing that I've had the privilege of creating content for players that is both educational and entertaining. Not only that, but knowing that I'm in the position to advocate and highlight so many nations, peoples, and cultures that are often underrepresented or overlooked in our genre is really, really special.
Thank you so much for joining us, Grace. It was great to meet you. Any last words for the fans before you go?
Yes, of course. First, I want to give a big thank you to all the people who have contributed to the historical research and narrative writing process of the game. And to the fans, I am so excited for all of you to come on this fascinating journey through history with us and for you to make history yours. Thanks so much. I'm so glad I got to chat with y'all today.
Thank you everyone for watching. Be sure to subscribe for future Dev Diary episodes. Follow us on the social platforms of your choice. Join the Insider program at arahistoryuntold.com. And don't forget to wishlist Ara History Untold on Steam. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.